In this video, we are going to talk about Pengu, some of its recent price action, the important support and resistance areas, and where we can expect the price of Pengu to go in the next few days and weeks. So we will be looking at the weekly chart, and what I can see here is that since 2025, Pengu has been in an absolutely devastating downtrend, with it dumping from over 4 cents all the way down to it currently being at less than a cent. It went down nearly 90% in just a year or so, and despite this incredibly aggressive dump slowing down, it is still very clearly in a downtrend and it is continuing to head lower. The dump actually started to slow down and stop back in February, which is also when Bitcoin stopped its dump. Back in February, Bitcoin went all the way down to 60k, and since then, leading up to May, it got a rally all the way up to 82k, and during that time, with a very strong correlation, Pengu also got a significant rally, with it going all the way up to over 1 cent. It got a rally of nearly 2x in just a couple of months, but since then Bitcoin got rejected at the area of about 82k and went all the way back down to 60k, and very similarly Pengu went all the way back down to where it was back in February. So the correlation between Pengu and Bitcoin is looking very strong in the last few months. Of course, it's not always like that, and previously in the last couple of years Pengu has actually moved very differently from Bitcoin. Back around October of 2025, when Bitcoin was creating new all-time highs, Pengu was actually significantly dumping and performing very poorly, and the price movement by Pengu was very different from the price movement by Bitcoin at certain periods, but in the last few months specifically, it is looking very similar. Also guys, if you are enjoying these videos and you want more updates about Pengu as well as other meme coins and altcoins and the crypto market in general, make sure to subscribe. It helps the channel way more than you know, and it allows me to continue making these videos. So if you're getting any value from these updates, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And now let's continue with the video about Pengu. So as I mentioned before, Pengu is still very clearly in a downtrend, with its recent highs back in January as well as more recently in May. It is continuing to create lower highs. With the lows, it is actually not going any lower, and it is holding very strongly onto this area of support at around 0.005. This is where Pengu stopped dumping back in the October liquidation event, which was a very significant and aggressive dump by the entire crypto market. Pengu went all the way down there for literally just a few minutes and then bounced back up very quickly. And since then, back in February, it got significant support from that area again, and now it is at the exact same level and it is trying to hold onto it. It has been consolidating at this level for the last few weeks, and it is trying to get a rally from there. We've seen Bitcoin behave quite similarly at the area of 60k, with it consolidating around there for the last few weeks. It has managed to get a bit of a rally from there again, heading all the way back up to 65k. Since then, it went back down to around 62k currently, so it is struggling around that area. I do think that it is very possible for Bitcoin to get a rally again from this area all the way up to maybe 70k or so. I do expect it to create a lower high, even if Bitcoin does manage to get another relief rally, and I do think that we are most likely still in a bear market. Bitcoin is still very clearly in a downtrend, and I would expect it to eventually head back down below 60k and create new lows for this bear market. So if that does happen and Bitcoin does manage to get that rally to 70k, Pengu could potentially also get a rally, but I would expect it to be another lower high. I wouldn't expect it to get all the way back up to where it was back in May. If we draw a trend line from these last two highs, we could get a pretty reasonable target for a relief rally by Pengu, which would be at around 1 cent. This is where the trend line is at the moment. So I do think that it's definitely possible for Pengu to get another relief rally back up to about 1 cent before it gets rejected off of this trend line and starts dumping again. Regardless of what happens in the short term, whether it gets the relief rally or not, I would expect it in the long term to continue its downtrend and continue dumping eventually below this crucial area of support at around half a cent. I would expect it to eventually break down below it and head all the way back down to the next area of support, which is the all-time low at around 0.004. As I said, I think that we are still most likely in a bear market, and in bear markets historically, altcoins tend to significantly underperform Bitcoin, especially altcoins such as Memecoins and very small market cap coins like Pengu. They tend to be very fragile since there isn't much value or utility behind them. Beyond the meme and the hype of it, memecoin communities tend to really go quiet in bear markets, and most memecoins perform very poorly in bear markets. Pengu is actually performing surprisingly well in the last few months, considering it is a meme coin and it has a pretty small market cap, but still in the long term, I would expect it to continue to dump much further and significantly underperform Bitcoin and Ethereum. And also, as I said, I am expecting Bitcoin and Ethereum themselves to also perform quite poorly, since obviously this is a bear market most likely. So I am quite pessimistic about Pengu for the next few months. I would expect at the very least most of 2026 to continue being a bear market year. So I definitely expect Pengu to eventually in the long term head all the way back down to its all-time low and try to get some support from there. And it is definitely completely possible for it to even head down below its all-time low and start to create much further lows when we get further into this bear market. Also, in general, I'm quite pessimistic about altcoins as a whole, not just Pengu, since as I said, historically, altcoins tend to underperform Bitcoin in bear markets. And for us to get an altcoin season, we first need to see Bitcoin getting to new all-time highs and Ethereum following it as well. That is historically required for us to see an altcoin season, and currently this is very far away from being the reality in the market. Bitcoin is about 50% down from its all-time high, Ethereum even more than that. So I definitely do not think that an altcoin season is likely at all anytime soon, and I think that it will not happen for many more months. And the structure of Pengu is not the worst ever. There are some worst looking altcoins, but it is definitely not good at all. And it is still very clearly in a downtrend. It is still very clearly looking quite weak, even especially if it does eventually break down below this area of support at around half a cent. Again, in the short term, a bit of a rally up to 1 cent is possible. This would actually be quite significant. This would be a rally of nearly 100%, and this would not be that surprising or unusual for such a small market cap meme coin. But again, in the long term, I'm quite pessimistic about Pengu. So, of course, this isn't financial advice whatsoever, but at the moment, I would definitely avoid being heavy into altcoins, and I don't think that Pengu is that strong either. Of course, there can be some exceptions, and I will be looking out for those exceptions for the coins that have a very good structure. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and watch more videos to see what other altcoins have a strong potential of outperforming Bitcoin for the next few months. I don't think that Pengu is really one of them in the long term, as I said, and I would mostly stick to Bitcoin and Ethereum at the moment. Maybe I would get into some altcoins that have a very good structure in the short term, but that's really it. If Pengu does manage to break above the trend line, above 1 cent, and it closes a weekly candle above it, this would be a very significant positive sign. Really, what would be more decisive if it manages to close a weekly candle above this previous high from back in May at around 0.012. This would be a very strong sign of a trend reversal by Pengu, but I think that at the moment it is looking very unlikely to happen. So guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it and you want more updates about Pengu as well as other meme coins and altcoins and the crypto market in general, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.